Sabres back in the win column. There was some good, there was some bad. I also got a rant on what happened with Connor McDavid this week. Do a little league-wide stuff, too. All coming up on the Locked On Sabres podcast.
Your Locked On Sabres, your daily podcast on the Buffalo Sabres. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody, and thanks for making this edition of the Locked On Sabres podcast your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcast. That does include our YouTube channel, where you can watch the show. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's edition of the show is presented by FanDuel. From the first whistle to the final drive, FanDuel makes the NFL playoffs even more exciting. Right now, new customers can bet $5, get $300 in bonus bets if you win your first bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Sneaky Joe DiBiase on this Wednesday edition after a win by the Buffalo Sabres. Pleasant surprise. They went to Vancouver. They get the win. A lot to talk about from that game. Got a league take to talk about, too, on Connor McDavid and his suspension from this week. But some fun stuff to get to, as I just mentioned, FanDuel there. Not fun was my sneaky good bet of the day in this game against Vancouver, because my sneaky good bet was that the Sabres would get beat and run out of energy in the third period. My bet was that the Canucks would score 2 or more goals in the third period. That was it. I thought the Sabres, having played the night before and practiced hard the morning of, would completely run out of gas in this game against the Canucks. And that did not happen. They got down. They went into the third, down a goal. And I think any right-minded individual would have thought, oh, they practiced this morning. They played last night. They're down 1 goal. They're bad in third periods in the first place. No way they're coming back in this game. But they did. And credit to a couple of individuals and one line that we'll talk about that scored all the goals last night for the Buffalo Sabres, the line of Jiri Kulich, Peterka, and Tage Thompson. So the Sabres win 3-2. If you want to check out our Locked On Sabres text club, that's available to you. You can hit us up, joinsubtext.com/LockedOnSabres. And as we look at this game, a 3-2 win over Vancouver, goals by Tage Thompson, Jiri Kulich, and Peterka, the 3 players that led the way for the Buffalo Sabres. All of their goals were impressive in different regards, but, you know, the Sabres, I stayed up for the first period. I went to bed when Vancouver tied the game at 1 early in the second, watched back the rest the next morning without checking the score. And again, same thing, like, I'm going to the third thinking there's no way they're coming back in this game, but they had a line last night that maybe they have found something. Maybe they've found a combination here that works. And it's only 1 game, so maybe you might want to specify it to a duo that works. And then Peterka had a really good night, and right now he's the third guy, but it had been Jason Zucker, who's been playing really well as well, but that had been more on the power play. Zucker misses this game last night with an illness. There's been a bug being passed around through the Sabres. Mattias Samuelsson had this, right? And now it's Zucker. So Lafferty did at one point, Obi Kubel, Matt Valentine, not Obi Kubel, but a lot of Sabres have gotten sick in the last 2 weeks, and Zucker missed the game last night because of whatever this is that's going around. So just like that, Sabres are already thin, right? They're missing Ryan McLeod. They're missing Jordan Greenway. Zucker, last minute, he's not playing. Tyson Kozak is playing in the top 6. That's where they're at going into that game. Oh, my good. Tyson Kozak is on the second line. Man, it's getting dangerous. But he didn't play that bad. That line was not their best on the night by any means. If you look at the Sabre forward lines and how much ice time they received at 5-on-5 and how they played, Lindy Ruff really leaned into his top line. And interestingly, if you look at the time on ice breakdown of the Sabre 4 lines last night, the Thompson, Kulich, Peterka line played 14-13 of ice time. Krebs, Benson, Quinn play 12-25. Cousins, Tuck, and Kozak actually would have been the third line on the night by ice time. They played 10:55, and actually their results were the worst on the team. And then you had the fourth line because they had 7 defensemen. You had the likes of Beck Malenstein and Sam Lafferty hardly playing at all. They played mostly with Kozak, and they played 2 minutes and 6 seconds of ice time together as a line. If you want to look at it individually, Malenstein 7:48 of ice time total. 6:29 of that at even strength, and Lafferty 5:40 at even strength. So those two really were not involved. It was that top line. Thompson on the wing, Peterka on the other wing, Kulich in between. That line playing 14 minutes of 5-on-5 ice time. They generated 27 27 shot attempts. The Canucks, while they were on the ice, had 12. That line outshot Vancouver 13-7. They outscored them 3-1. Scoring chances were 13-8, and high danger chances were 5-3. They won every category. They were far and away the leaders of the pack last night, that line. And if I'm Lindy Ruff, I am keeping that thing together, and I am praying that could be a big boost for me offensively. Give me one line on this hockey team that night to night is going to produce. And that is something that they didn't really have a lot last year, a little bit. And this year they haven't had, I would say, much at all that they did have 2 years ago. Because 2 years ago, a lot of comparisons I've made to that season and how much offense they had and the way they were built, the way they played. But one thing that's worth mentioning that the Sabres could really use right now that team 2 years ago had, they had one line that every single night you knew they were going to show up. You knew they were going to produce. You knew they were going to outplay their opponent when they were out there. That Thompson, Skinner, Tuck line 2 years ago was one of the best lines in hockey. And it gave you a foundation. It gave you a baseline every night to know I got at least one of my 4 lines that I know is going to show up. And this year, that has not been the case. So finding that in any form would be really nice. And that line has not really been tested at all this year, in part because Thompson now is looking like a full-time winger. And maybe there's a day in the future where he goes back to center. But I spoke with Lindy Ruff on WGR this morning, and I asked him about Thompson on the wing and whether, is he through the injury that forced him to go over there? And are we now at just, well, it's going well, so I'm not going to move him? And that's what Lindy said. Lindy said Thompson's getting more chances on the wing this year than he has at center, so he's leaving him there. He's leaving him at center for the time being. And he, just a couple games ago, decided, you know what? Let me try the rookie at top line center, right? Like Cousins has had his opportunity. Krebs has played in the top 6. I'm not going to put Lafferty up there. And with McLeod out, all right, let me try Kulich up on the top line. And I think it's gone pretty well. I think Kulich looks like he's comfortable in the middle of that ice. And then getting to see Peterka with them at 5-on-5, I was really impressed by what we saw from that line. 2 of the Sabre 3 goals were off face-off plays by Jiri Kulich on that line. So the first goal, the Thompson goal, Kulich wins it straight back. He's been very good on faceoffs this year for a rookie. He wins it straight back. Thompson from the wing position comes in, grabs the puck. He goes wide, makes the Canucks think he's going to shoot in the slot. He goes a little wider than that, kind of fakes out the defenseman, has the lane, rips it past Thatcher Demko because he's the one guy on the team you could trust to have a dangerous shot. The other third goal the Sabres score in this game to take the lead, Kulich wins another draw, and this time Dahlin slings in, takes it down the wall. Peterka drops into that soft zone in the middle of the slot, and Dahlin finds him, and Peterka rips it by Thatcher Demko. You get 2 face-off plays that Kulich wins the draw, and the Sabres score immediately after. So loved seeing that line. It's the best thing I think that came out of that game last night, because otherwise, Sabres were fine. They're fine. I didn't think they dominated other than when that line was on the ice. The Krebs line, what were shot attempts for the other lines? 8-7 in favor of the Krebs line. The Cousins line with Kozak and Tuck actually got outplayed 7-11 shot attempts, 4-9 in shots. Nobody gave up a goal, though. So it was a one-line show more than anything, I thought, last night. And Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen was great. Luukkonen was fantastic. He allowed a goal below expectation, which is good. He had big critical saves at the end of the game, including a sprawling save with 1 second to play to keep the game from going to overtime. So you got a good game from Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen as well. When we come back, one bad thing that I saw from the game and one Elias Pettersson related thing that I just want to mention was an observation that I had, an interaction between Pettersson and a certain Buffalo Sabre. Very brief, but get to that when we come back as well. And I want to look at where we are in the standings. If we can have any sort of hope, I'll do my best. I'm going to be optimistic today. Let's come on. Let's go. Let's find some optimism in this win. Sabres and Calgary next on Thursday night. That when we come back here in the Locked On Sabres podcast. This edition of the Locked On Sabres podcast presented by SelectQuote. In sports, having a winning strategy is everything. It's how the best teams make it to the Super Bowl, the World Series, the Stanley Cup. I know we don't know much about that last one here, but maybe someday. Same goes for life. Having a strategy like life insurance from SelectQuote can protect your financial legacy and keep your family's future secure. SelectQuote makes it easy to find the perfect life insurance policy. As one of America's leading insurance brokers with over 40 years of experience, they've helped over 2 million customers find $700 billion in coverage since 1985. What sets SelectQuote apart is their personal touch. Unlike other brokers that offer one-size-fits-all policies, their licensed agents tailor coverage to fit your unique needs. If you're in good health, you might even qualify for same-day coverage of up to $5 million. No medical exam required. And it's more affordable than you think. You can get up to $1 million in coverage for as little as $20 a month. Get the right life insurance for you for less. It's SelectQuote.com/LockedOnNHL. Go to SelectQuote.com/LockedOnNHL today to get started. It's SelectQuote.com/LockedOnNHL. SelectQuote. They shop, you save. Sabres win over the Canucks 3-2 in Vancouver last night. Talked about that top line, which I loved. Kulich at center with Thompson and Peterka. Do more of a deep dive on Thompson on the wing this week and comparing some of his numbers, center versus wing, what it would mean for him to play on the wing long term, because I do think while that's looked good and the Sabres are at a point in their season where, hey, anything that works, you stick to it. Do not necessarily think it's a great idea for him to become a full-time winger. I'll explain why a little bit later on this week. A couple of things I want to mention from the game last night that I also noticed. One, there is this criticism that top players, star players, skilled players get all the time, that I see the same mistakes from veterans, from defensive forwards, or even more so physical forwards. And it never gets mentioned because it doesn't fit the narrative. And I saw two moments last night that fit that description. And it's one of these pet peeves I have in sports where, all right, Rasmus Dahlin for one. Others than him, Power is one of these guys. Maybe use Power instead. Power has been criticized often for, hey, man, why weren't you tying that guy up in front of the net? Hey, dude, what? You're 6'6". Why are you not taking him out? Why are you not challenging him immediately? You're bigger than him. You know, Power, and sometimes rightfully so, has had that criticism. And I think it's maybe the biggest criticism that he gets as a player for the Sabres is you're not tough enough. You're not responsible enough in front of your net. You do not possess the ability to take a guy who's in front of your goaltender and move him or tie him up. Oftentimes, what are you doing on those plays? Power gets it a lot. And I know why. He has expectation, and he's big, but he's a first overall pick as a 6'5" defenseman. You want him to make those plays. I understand why this happens, but don't think that he's unique in that. Don't think that defensive, physical players don't make these mistakes as well. I broke down a couple of weeks ago when the Sabres lost to the Colorado Avalanche. One of the biggest mental defensive errors of the season was made by Beck Malenstein on a goal at the end of that hockey game that tied it for Colorado late. Beck Malenstein, who the Sabres traded a second-round pick for, whose reputation is big, physical, veteran, responsible. And who made the error? Who made the mental error on that goal against Colorado at the end? It was Beck Malenstein. A rookie mistake, a mistake that had any of the likes of Peterka or one of these skilled forwards made, he would have been crushed for it. Mallenstein makes it. No word about it. Because, you must have just messed up. He makes those plays all the time, right? Dennis Gilbert last night, who is a physical defenseman, right? He's big. He's 6'2", I know only, but he throws his weight around at 220 and he'll hit you. He is someone that has the reputation of, I'm not letting you stand in front of the net. I'm going to cross-check you. It's not happening. Last night, he only plays 7 minutes and 48 seconds. And Vancouver scores 2 goals, and both goals had a common theme. Go back and watch both of those goals. The first one, it happens it's directly correlated to the goal. The second one, it happens before the goal. Vancouver swings it around. They score like a little bit after. Both goals, Dennis Gilbert, who is your big physical veteran defenseman, doesn't tie up his man in front. Mental error. What are you doing? Why are you staring at the puck? Why are you not tying up the man, engaging with the forward in front of the net, and moving him from the front of your goaltender? Why are you not at least tying up the stick? Dennis Gilbert doesn't fit the narrative of young, skilled player, and he doesn't have expectation, so it doesn't get mentioned. But those mistakes get made by those guys just as often. Guarantee you. And Gilbert makes that mistake last night 2 times. He only plays 7 minutes. Hardly have an opportunity to do it. And he directly contributes to both Vancouver goals. The first one, it's side of the net. He's just, again, he's not watching his man. There's no other play. He's just standing in front of his goaltender. The only play to make as a defenseman there is go engage with your forward and tie him up. He doesn't do it. And then the second one, he could have forced a turnover by doing the exact same thing. He doesn't do it again. And maybe that contributed to why he didn't play that much, other than, they had 7 defensemen. He often doesn't play 10 minutes. In fact, thinking about Dennis Gilbert, who is not, he's hardly an NHL defenseman, right? He's a tweener. He's a good story. He's from Buffalo. It's cool that he made the league. He's a good dude. I've heard him in interviews. I've not talked to him personally, but he's done interviews. He sounds like a good listen. He, though, is a guy who's been back and forth. NHL, AHL, back NHL, AHL. He'll stand up for teammates. He'll throw big hits. He does his job in that regard sometimes, but you're supposed to be responsible too. And it didn't happen last night. And that's now, 5 games in a row where he has not cracked 10 minutes of ice time. So when he does play, Lindy doesn't really trust him all that much to play a lot. So that's not necessarily a solution, I don't think, to turning the Sabre season around. And then the one other thing that I wanted to get to as an observation from last night's game, go watch as the game ends. Maybe I'm making something of nothing. I'm not really making something of it. I want to point out that I noticed something. Rasmus Dahlin and Elias Pettersson, who've played together internationally, both from Sweden, close enough in the same age, Dahlin younger. As the game ends, Luukkonen shuts the door, wins the game with that save in the last second. Dahlin gives Pettersson a little, pat on the butt. Like, hey, good game, man. But little friendly. So I don't know what kind of relationship they have, but we're looking for any reason to think the Sabres could make a big trade. And Elias Pettersson is one of those guys. He scores a goal last night. And the thing that I've kind of been crossing my fingers on Pettersson coming to Buffalo is the one thing that could cause him to not put up a fight on that, even though he has no trade protection. He can make it ugly. He could tell his agent, he could tell the Sabres, Kevin Adams, I'm not coming there. Don't trade for me. The one thing I'm crossing my fingers as to why that wouldn't happen is what's his relationship with Dahlin. If it's really good and Dahlin could put in a good word, or Dahlin could say, hey man, we need you bad. But we'll figure it out if you come. I'm hoping that relationship exists between those two. The standings right now. So Lindy told me and Jeremy this morning, hey, we get on a 5 or 6 game run and we're back in the picture. And I would say they're back in the picture if that were to happen. I don't know how close they would be, though, because even with the win last night, the Sabres are 11 points back. And the sad part now about the standings is they are behind 2 teams in the Atlantic that are in those playoff spots. Boston has dropped out like we thought would happen. They're not as good this year. Ottawa and Montreal are in those positions. How frustrating is that? Ottawa and Montreal. Here, though, is I'm going to do the best positive spin I can. All right, let's say what Lindy says comes true. They go on a 5-6 game heater. Luukkonen gets hot down the stretch. The power play keeps rolling, whatever. They do whatever they do to get some wins. The one thing I will say about this year in the Eastern Conference, every team above the Sabres in the standings, in the wild card race, I would say except for the Rangers, who are starting to figure it out and have a lot of talent. Other than the Rangers, I would say every single one of those teams in front of them stinks or has it in them to stink. Ottawa might be good, but might be. I don't want to go all the way there yet because there's some nights you watch them and man, like that is not a good team. Other nights they look better. So Ottawa, I'm a little more on the fence with. Every other team stinks. Really. Montreal even. Like I don't like a lot of their numbers. When I watch them, I think they get some good goaltending. They have a -12 goal differential on the season. Columbus doesn't have the talent. Boston doesn't have the depth anymore. Philly, I think, is just bad. The Penguins have the worst goal differential in the East. And they're old and thin. Detroit stinks. The Islanders stink. Like everybody ahead of the Sabres stinks. So if you need them all to keep floundering, like you might get that. Of course, the reason why you are going to be hard to see them getting back in it is less about all those teams in front of them. Like the point of the season is that, hey, it's not about those teams in front of you. You stink too. And hopefully they can change that. I don't know if it's going to happen. When we come back, Connor McDavid suspended 3 games by the NHL. I think there's a big problem in the NHL, and there has been for a while. And I think that was emphasized this week with this McDavid stuff. I got a thought on that when we return here in the Locked On Sabres podcast. Today's episode of Locked On Sabres presented by FanDuel Sportsbook. From the first whistle to the final drive, FanDuel makes the NFL playoffs even more exciting. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win your first bet. That's $300 if you just keeps the action going. If you head over to FanDuel right now, hey, you want this Bills game on Sunday? You might want to get in now. I still wonder if they're going to be favored by the time Sunday approaches. Right now, though, they are 1.5 point underdogs, plus 108 on the money line. There's an over-under of 47.5. If you want to win or you want an emotional hedge, you can check it out over on FanDuel. Just visit FanDuel.com, join today, get started with $300 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Make this season unforgettable, playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the National Football League. Back here on the Locked On Sabres podcast, Sabres win over Vancouver 3-2. Their next game is against the Calgary Flames, 9 o'clock on Thursday night. Let's get to something that is happening in the West as well in this week, and that is that Connor McDavid was suspended 3 games for cross-checking Connor Garland of Vancouver, who we saw last night almost score for the Canucks to tie it at the last second against Buffalo. McDavid cross-checked him in the face and got suspended. And, okay, he deserved the suspension. Here's my thought on McDavid this week, though. He is responding or reacting to a league-wide NHL problem that he's not taking anymore. That's been the story out of Edmonton this week, is this guy is not sitting around and waiting for the league to protect him anymore. McDavid is getting tackled by Connor Garland. The game, they're down 1. There's under a minute to play, and they're trying to tie the hockey game. And what does Connor Garland do? Because he knows how the NHL works. This is why it's a league problem. It's not a Connor Garland problem. He's just exploiting a horrific setup that the NHL has where players know with under a minute to play, there is nothing you could do, nothing that would get a penalty called. So Garland tackles Connor McDavid. And when he's trying to get up, he actually puts his legs together so McDavid can't shake his leg free. And then McDavid finally does shake loose, and he grabs onto him and pulls him back down to the ice. It is the most blatant penalty ever. Garland knows he's taking a penalty. He also knows it's not going to get called. So McDavid, standing up for himself and saying, I'm not taking this anymore, cross-checks him in the face. You want to say there was a better way for him to do it? Fine. He deserved the suspension. He took it. If I were him, if I were in Edmonton, I'd be like, let's go. Finally. Let's keep doing it. You're not doing this to us anymore because the league's not protecting us, so we got to protect us. McDavid sits this year in penalties drawn per 60 minutes this season, 197th. There should be a penalty called on him every shift. Maybe there shouldn't be called. There probably is a penalty being, taken on McDavid every shift. So he should be number one. He should be top 5, whatever. He gets hooked all the time. He gets interfered with all the time. He gets tripped up all the time when doesn't have the puck late in games. McDavid is responding to something that Crosby got frustrated with at times in his career, and now McDavid's doing it, which is, I play in a league where my league doesn't protect me, and I'm a star, and I deserve to be protected because I'm getting interfered with. I'm not saying like he should get calls that don't exist. He's getting interfered with, and it's very different than football and other sports. Every other sport, football especially, is the quarterbacks are the money makers. The quarterbacks are what the league runs on. We are going to set, maybe you would argue they go too far, but at least they make an effort to protect their quarterbacks and protect the stars of their league. The NHL, I feel like, goes the opposite. They say, no, go ahead, open season. You want to tackle Connor McDavid when the game's on the line late? Go ahead. We'll allow it. The NFL maybe would say, okay, they're making up rules to protect the quarterback. I'm not asking the NHL to make up rules that would get called on Connor McDavid. I'm just asking you to call the freaking rule book. That's it. Very frustrating. Very frustrating. These are the types of problems and controversies they have in teams that are good, by the way. Be nice to have these conversations about a player here once in a while. I don't really think it ever happened with Eichel. I don't know. Eichel was a more physical player. He liked to slow the game down. And I feel like he always had good stats, better stats with penalties drawn. Maybe that wasn't by efficiency, though, like McDavid's here. So I don't know. Can't recall ever having this issue. You know why, really, actually? Because the last time the Sabres were truly great or as good as Edmonton was 05-06 and 06-07. And those were the 2 years where they called everything. Right? That's when they were protecting the star players. And you had a lot of goals. All right. That's it. We'll talk about Thompson as a winger. We'll talk about the Calgary matchup. A lot to get to this week. So thanks for listening. If you want to check out some Bills chatter, should. Joe Marino, Locked On Bills. That's available to you, as well as some fantasy hockey talk. Steal and Flip got you covered there. Locked On NHL as well, if you are looking for some league-wide, more stuff on McDavid and whatnot. But that's going to do it for us today in the Locked On Sabres podcast. We'll talk to you tomorrow here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.